Hello and welcome to the Doctors Who Read Stuff. My name is Chris. Tonight we're covering the next 3 sections of Dune by Frank Herbert. Gurney Hallack, caught between his need for revenge on the Harkonnens and the survival of him and his men, decides to join with the smugglers. Meanwhile, Paul and Jessica, having survived the storm and their subsequent journey across the desert, come face to face with a sandworm. And lastly, of the Baron Harkonnens planning and plotting, Liet Kynes is set across the desert with no stillsuit to die. Join us as we discuss this and more next. Hello and welcome to the Doctors Who Read Stuff. My name is Chris.
And I'm Chip.
And I'm Brian.
All right, so we're starting off with Gurney Hallack, and we really haven't seen much from him recently.
Yeah, and this scene, it feels kind of like a reminder that, hey, Gurney's still alive. He's still out there. He's still pretty skilled at what he does. Just kind of letting you know where he's at, because maybe he'll come into play later, and you don't want to forget about him. Maybe a little foreshadowing.
Sure, and it's interesting because he's with the smugglers, and he's got some of his men with him, and he seems to be like all about. He's just like, we got to go attack the Harkonnens. I want revenge. I want to redeem.
Yep.
I want vengeance for my Duke. And the smugglers are kind of like, well, hold on here, just slow your roll, my dude.
Yeah.
And it almost seems to me like the smugglers are like, you know what? He would be really handy to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that was kind of, part of it, just kind of reminding you how skilled of a warrior he is, in addition to being a master of the balisette, which I'm still waiting for Brian to learn how to play.
Next time, Brian?
Yeah.
I've got a guitar with 6 strings. I don't think I have anything with 9, although I suppose I can make a we'll see what I can come up with for a subsequent episode.
My son's got the one with 7 strings, or the guitar with 7 strings. So.
That's closer.
Yeah, almost 9. But this one was kind of, it was a good back and forth. You kind of got a little bit more into the economics of things and kind of the role the smugglers play, and that, the Gurney could be an asset to him. And Gurney really kind of decides that he's going to stick it out with them and leave I believe he leaves the decision of whether his men will stay or go to them. But I think he sees it as kind of a long play to eventually seek his revenge on the Harkonnens.
Well, and we also learn a couple of things about Gurney in this chapter as well. So he still believes Jessica's the traitor. And
he's not as convinced as Howard, but he still believes it.
And you're really seeing the effect that Leto's decision to employ that subterfuge is having throughout the book after he dies. I mean, that decision still has repercussions, 200 pages in.
Yeah.
But we also find out that they mention Rabban, and we find out his full name and title is Count Rabban of Langkiville, something like that. But apparently Rabban killed Gurney's family, so there's some bad blood there, which probably only fuels his desire to stay and fight.
Yeah, and that was one in that very scene when Rabban's name is mentioned. It just talks about the upsurge of rage that Gurney felt all of a sudden, basically at hearing that name again. So.
Yeah. But the most interesting thing to me after he makes the decision he's going to go with the smugglers and all that jazz is one of the Atreides soldiers who's injured is basically dying. And he wants to hear Gurney play the balisette as he floats off into the nether.
Kind of like we want to hear Brian play the balisette. But...
Yeah.
Although
Some,
hopefully you guys don't fall away to sleep or worse.
yeah, I'm not ready for that yet. But when I am, I want you there to play the battle set.
Oh, okay. We'll make it a date, in
I
80
know you're
years from now.
working weddings, so
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, there we go. But it's interesting from Gurney's perspective how, he's like, you know what? These are basically my men now, and I need to take care of them. And he goes into this with a very heavy heart, but on the outside, he puts on the smile and is ever the performer as he goes and sits down next to this guy to play a song. And that was just like, whoa. That was like one of those humanity moments that you get when you read. You're just like, oh man, that sucks. But
the other thing that they kind of hint at or kind of talk around is kind of stuff that's happening in the deep desert. So I know that there's a conversation where Hallack tells, I think it was Tuek was the smuggler, that I'm told that the guild seldom sends spice lighters over the deep desert, and that there's rumors that you can see bits of greenery here and there if you know where to look. And the smuggler's basically, those are just rumors. It's basically, he's saying, why would you want to go live? He's making his argument against Gurney leaving and going with the Fremen and staying with here. But,
right.
He talks about their security and all the stuff that they've got. But I like that they kind of hint at that. And especially with one of the other scenes we'll talk about tonight with Liet and just kind of the potential for life in the desert and, things that could change the face of Arrakis.
And that whole, I don't know if scene is the right word since it's in a book, but the whole like Tuek like playing up the smugglers and like downplaying the Fremen. It's almost like a job interview with like an in-demand candidate. It's like, we are pretty awesome. These guys don't have anything on us, so
yeah, we've kind of got him on the hook. We just need to set the hook now so we don't lose this guy.
So that was yeah. Oh man. But we then go back to Paul and Jessica, and what is funny to me is that we start off with Paul saying that, oh, you know what, I could get used to this quiet. This could be a good life. And Jessica, I think, is aware of the transformation he's gone through, because I think she's sitting here wondering if he's accepted this and like kind of cloaked himself in this comfort and this quiet and this acceptance because of like one of the future paths that he's now able to see, or if maybe he's just super adaptive. Who knows? Maybe he's pretty chill and laid back. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he feels calm almost, and that those outside noises aren't bothering him at this moment.
Yeah.
Well, part of that because it is, I would have to think it's because he knows that no one is going to come look for him there. At this point, they've escaped the storm, presumably dead. No one is chasing them. Why not just live a peaceful, quiet existence at that point? So I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. That sounds pretty nice.
Yeah. It would kind of make for a bad book and movie, though.
Yeah,
if it ended here,
right. Point. Yeah.
And they made it to the desert, and they lived happily ever after. Well,
the last.
But I don't disagree, because I would love to be like that and just say, "Yep, I've made it to this point. I'm gonna live a peaceful life, and nobody's gonna bother me."
Yeah. But we get our exposure to.
So this is the first time we hear of use of a thumper.
Yeah,
isn't it?
That's what I was just gonna say. Is we get this new tech in the thumper, which I think is just this metal hydraulic thing that just
like a tamping device almost that just basically pounds sand.
pounds. Maybe that's where the expression came from.
It actually kind of. Well, I've never seen the movie Bambi, but there was the rabbit that would stomp the ground, and his name was Thumper.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
same sort of deal.
And that's basically the same theory. That's what it does.
Yep.
So since the worms are drawn to rhythmic noises like the spice harvesters and The thumper, I believe it's a Fremen device, but I guess we don't know a
Yeah.
lot about it
Well,
yet.
and also
But I
just
Right.
think it's what
footsteps, right?
because when they do
Yeah.
and I can't remember if it's one of the scenes we'll talk about tonight, but when they're actually walking across the desert, they're doing it's like step, drag, drag, step,
And
drag, stop,
I
step.
think that was here.
Yeah,
It might have
when they're
been, but
crossing that
yeah, here it is.
expanse after they set the thumper,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
step, drag, wait, step, drag, wait,
And
step.
I
Yeah, so it's
actually, hold on here. I actually found a screen grab, I think from the upcoming movie, that shows what I think might be Liet walking through the desert, and you can see his footprint patterns, and so you can actually,
oh, that that could be
yeah. So,
interesting.
um,
I
yep.
haven't seen
So
this yet,
bringing
so
that
I'm
up,
curious.
like we see the robe figure again, assuming it's Liet. I don't know, but if we zoom in a little bit, you can actually see how you've got the drag from the left foot and then the right foot and the left foot and then it's like left left and then it's right. So I thought that was pretty cool, that the movie's
Oh
going
yeah.
to that.
It's a great amount of
Yes,
detail. If they're
yes, exactly. So yeah, I just thought that was neat. um
yeah.
the And then when they do manage to get across, like, does the thumper like turn off, or like the worm gets it and somebody else sets another one? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I thought the thumpers, yeah, they're basically there to draw the
Mm-hmm.
worm. So eventually the worm's going to show up and eat the thumper,
Yep.
probably, and then realize that it's not what they thought it was and keep moving. But yeah, somebody set off another thumper. I thought it was towards the rocks they were heading to, or near, somewhere
It
off
was. I think
one
it
way
was
or
to like
another.
draw
Because
the
at this
worm
point
away
they've heard
from
the
that
worm.
point, away from
Yeah,
those rocks, because Paul makes the. He's like, did somebody call the worm off?
yeah.
Uh, But this is a great
Okay, that
place
was sweet.
to kind of go back to that screenshot that we showed in our trailer analysis video of the worm kind of lording over Paul and Jessica. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
it's a cool shot, and just the detail on the worm.
It's a very visual scene,
Yeah.
even in the book. And when it talks about the worm blotted out the moonlight as it brushed the
Mm,
rocks above
Hmm.
them, you- and he could smell the
yeah.
cinnamon, and that's when Paul begins to wonder, what does the worm have to do
Hmm.
with the spice, and
Yeah.
and then I think they talk about the teeth, which are what they use to make the Chris knives, and they're these big, kind of white blades that are basically in its mouth,
Yeah.
and the crystal teeth that curve the shape of Chris knives glinting around the rim, the bellows breath of cinnamon. Yeah, and I think I mentioned that, I thought it was here in the book they said something about, the diameter of this thing's mouth was like
80.
80
Yeah,
meters.
80 meters sounds right.
Yeah. Yep.
But I said, in this still from the trailer, it didn't look quite 80 meters to me. I mean, it looked
Well,
pretty big and impressive, and it would probably wipe you out pretty quickly. But and maybe it's just 80 meters would not have
I
looked
mean,
realistic, as
I might say
it
60
looked
feet,
too.
like just looking at the picture. I mean, that would probably be good.
Yeah,
I don't, my foot,
that's 20
yeah,
That's
yards, which would
20
be,
years, and that would be,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
half. But
right. Yeah.
something like that.
Anyway,
But those are
yeah,
nitpicks. I'm
oh
not the one
yes.
making the movie, and it still
it
looks
does.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
It may be a good time to say that if you're listening to this and you haven't seen our trailer analysis video, you should pop over and do that. I think I can actually link to it up there.
I'm picturing
that's
it in
it.
my mind, and it looks good.
So I think it's there. I think it's there.
Nice.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see. I'm guessing.
All right.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
So isn't this where after this is where they hear the other thumper, because then the worm
Yep.
takes off after the. the other thumper,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
yeah, well, and they say that this one was big, but then Paul says it's not as big as the one that got their thopter earlier in the, a couple scenes ago.
Right.
But then, but there's a little paragraph, and this is one thing about Herbert's writing is that you can't really skim over sections because he plants just little pieces of information here and there, so you kind of have to be somewhat thorough when you read. But this one is it goes back to one of Paul's visions, and he's talking about like these telescoping barbed sticks and the maker hooks, and
Yeah.
just foreshadowing that there is a
Yeah.
relationship between the Fremen and the worms that we haven't seen yet, but he's seen visions that are kind of leading him to this conclusion.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's one that I think the first time I've read it, I read it years ago. I don't know that I picked up on that, but in subsequent readings, it's like, oh, the seeds are all there. It's kind of like we've talked about in other books where, these seeds are kind of planted along the way, and then eventually you're like, oh, that's what he was getting at.
Well, and he even knows they're called maker hooks. He just can't see
Mm-hmm.
what they're used for.
What they're doing with,
Yep.
and then Jessica's like, well, why would they even call a worm? Why would they want to do that? But,
Companionship on a lonely
maybe we'll find
desert
out.
night.
You know,
Probably.
are
You
they
never know.
snuggly?
What
Are they
Fremen do in
sn-
their own time.
Are they snuggly
They might
worms?
be.
The one in the movie doesn't look snuggly. But...
No, not so
No.
snuggly.
No, but they also find after the worm gets called away, they see these poles that are kind of leading the way up into the rocks, almost like a path was laid out for them to follow or for others to follow. But
Yeah, and it leads into a crevasse, and they note that there are man-made steps, and there's almost like a little sanctuary inside. So you've got like plants growing, bushes, cacti, tiny clumps of leaves. There are some mice, and some Fremen.
and a hawk. Well, there's a hawk that comes and eats the mice that kind of reminds them that, oh, this is a dangerous
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're getting ready to pitch the tent, and then they hear the voices say, most intruders here regret finding the Fremen.
Because they were making some comment about, well, we'll sleep here tonight, and then we'll try to find the Fremen tomorrow.
Yep.
And there's like more than one of them, and there's some dialogue back and forth, and one of them refers to Still, calls him Still.
Yep. At this point, they think there's only two of them.
Yeah.
Because they hear two voices, but we'll find out. It'll probably be next week. We'll talk more about where things go after this scene.
But I think the interesting part of this is Paul realizes that this was not a future that he foresaw. Like, he was blind to this. So it tells us, the reader, that there are some limitations to what he's able to see and what he's able to do. And we don't know why this path was hidden from him, but that's kind of interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to unpack there, I think, with foreshadowing. Like, it feels like there's a lot there, but like only half of it. Like, if I'm going to be honest, this portion was a little hard to read because it seemed so cryptic that you really, at least for me on my first go through, there wasn't a whole lot I could glean from this. But there's obviously substance there. I just couldn't quite pick up a lot of it, at least at this go around. In fact, having read ahead just enough, I did go back afterward, and I kind of figured some things out. But yeah, my first go through was a little hard sailing during this portion.
It's kind of like the first time you read something like Harry Potter or Wheel of Time, and there are these like clues and little snippets that are planted throughout these books, and you don't pick up on the first time because they don't have any meaning. There's nothing to say like, oh,
there's no
that
context
thing
to them.
But then when you go back and you reread, you're like, oh, Matt saw the tower in Eye of the World. So, yeah.
How Rand.
Spoilers, Chris. Come on.
Come on, man.
Beep.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, why don't we
Yeah,
talk
but I
about
mean,
Liet?
yeah, and, and this is
Oh
another one.
boy.
This scene always feels clunky when I read it, but there's so much information that's being kind of not force fed, but just put right in front of you that there's all this potential to change the face of
Mm-hmm.
Arrakis, and there's ways to do it, and Kynes is kind of figuring all this out, but
So Herbert
it doesn't end
he
well.
could have done this a lot worse because he's
Oh
delivering
yeah.
the exposition from the perspective of Liet is out in the desert and he's basically hallucinating that his father's lecturing him. So the exposition is coming from his dead father instead of him just like having this constant train of thought or rambling out loud or something like that. So it is more engaging than it could have been, but still very heavy on exposition, and I don't
And it
always.
and it fits within the
It
narrative.
does.
It fits within the narrative that the Harkonnens put him out there without a
Mm-hmm.
still suit to basically kill him without,
Right.
being the one that,
Yeah.
slayed him with their
Yep.
hand, that he just died of, desert
Mm-hmm.
conditions.
And like he knows, so that the hawks circling above him know that he's toast. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
rational, logical part of his brain that's like, I'm dead. I'm walking over a pre-spice mass. I'm hallucinating. These hawks are coming in, but like there's like this part of him that's like, oh, if there are hawks, maybe the Fremen will come and investigate. Maybe they'll come and see if there's
So
moisture.
it's
Yeah.
So he's like finding
yeah.
this hope to cling to, even though like this logical part of his brain is like, yeah, no. So
Well, it's hopes to cling to, and then it's also telling you how the Fremen do survive in the desert.
true.
So it's
True.
different things that
True.
they look
Yep.
for that might mean water, might mean life. And then the whole pre-spice mass was kind of interesting, which eventually explodes. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a stage in the growth of the spice where it explodes in order to get like above ground, basically, or up to the surface where soon then the harvesters come and harvest it. But
Yeah.
it's
Make
just
her help him.
yeah.
But poor Liet. The Fremen did not come in time to
Yes.
save him, and he got blowed up.
No, well, it's
He
it's
died.
kind of curious too that he was set up as such an important figure early on,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
that he had this reverence among the Fremen, and he kind of played both sides. That he was technically employed by the Emperor, but he worked with the Harkonnens, worked with the Atreides, worked with the Fremen, kind of had all these connections, and then boom, he's gone.
Who's gone? Oh, Liet's gone. Yeah, I thought you meant one of us left.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
no, no, dude, we're still here.
Oh,
No,
we're still here.
I was talking
Yeah.
about Kynes.
And well, I agree with that, but I also think him dying at this point sets up tension further down in the book because he was clearly keen on making sure Paul survived. And
That and he was also kind of the de facto leader of the
well, yeah,
Fremen
yeah,
in
and
many
now with
ways,
him
which
gone,
leaves an opening.
there is there's nobody to say this Paul kid is important.
Yeah.
So there's the opportunity, which I think we'll find out next week, for some conflict there. So
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
not to foreshadow, but I foreshadowed. I might have even five shadowed. I don't know. I
Can you
can.
do that?
Yeah, it's part of being able to see through time.
Ah,
I
That helps.
actually canned my own pre-spice mass earlier, and that's what I've been drinking.
Nice.
Yeah. You know what? We should just stop. This is getting ridiculous. Okay, so next time we are covering two sections. We have what happens when Paul and Jessica encounter. Well, Paul and Jessica encountered the Fremen, but we find out what happens there, and then
Mm-hmm.
we find out what happens at the cave of the ridges.
Wonder. Oh,
Ridges.
ridges.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you're following along, it is 2 sections.
Cave of Wonders in South Dakota, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean,
My
they're
bad.
almost the same place. Anyway, we have the Discussing Dune content dropping every Thursday afternoon. If you enjoyed this video, please tap the like button below. Please hit the subscribe button below. And if you'd like to be notified when we put out new content, please enable notifications. We would love it if you would use the comments section. Anything that we got wrong, anything that you thought was cool that we didn't touch on. So please utilize that. We would love to interact. And until next time.
Allons-y.